The sun was low when I found it. The Carnival, the one from when I was a kid. I never forgot that place, even when everyone told me I should. But you don't forget watching someone die. I was just passing through this town like always, moving from nowhere to nowhere. 35 years old and nothing to show for it, except a few jail stints and a truck that barely runs. This was just another stop, except it wasn't. The minute I heard that faint music box tune drifting through the trees, I knew something was wrong. My stomach knotted up, the same feeling I had when I was 10, standing in front of the funhouse, waiting for a ride that never came back. No one believed me back then. Said I was just a dumb kid with an overactive imagination. But I saw it. A man went in, and he never came out. Not alive, anyway. The rusty gates squeaked as I pushed them open. The sign above, Carnival 1945, was barely legible. The paint was peeling, like it hadn't been touched in years. I walked through, feeling like the walls were closing in on me, and that's when it hit me. I'd been here before, but that was impossible. This place shut down decades ago. The fear was crawling back into my bones, wrapping around my chest, squeezing tight. I wasn't a kid anymore, though. I'd seen some things since then, survived worse. But this was different. In the middle of the carnival, I found an old hall of mirrors. I don't know why I went in. Maybe I thought if I could just look at myself, I could make sense of what was happening. Maybe I needed to see if I was still me. The mirror was cracked, its surface cloudy with age, but my reflection, it wasn't right. My face looked the same, but my eyes, God, my eyes were dead. Hollow, wide open, like I'd seen something no one should ever see. I backed away, heart pounding in my chest, and tripped over something hard. I looked down and saw a skeleton, just lying there. Its hand was clutching an old ticket stub. The year? 1945. I stumbled out, shaking, trying to wipe the cold sweat from my forehead, but my hand was bleeding. A shard of glass from the mirror had stuck in my palm, and blood was running down my wrist. I wiped it off, but that music, it started again. Louder. I wasn't alone. I couldn't be. I ran toward the carousel. The horses were frozen in place, chipped paint, and lifeless eyes staring at nothing. And sitting on one of them was a woman. She didn't fit here. She was dressed too nice, like she'd stepped out of a different world. Her red dress caught my eye first, but when she turned to face me, my blood ran cold. It was my mom. She'd been gone since I was 8, disappeared. One day she said she was leaving town and I never saw her again. My dad pretended she never existed, like she was a ghost. And there she was, sitting on a carousel horse like it was no big deal, her face blank, her eyes as dead as mine had been in that mirror. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered. Her voice was flat, lifeless. My head spun. None of this made sense. My mom couldn't be here. She was dead. She had to be. But the smell of decaying cotton candy filled the air, and distant laughter echoed from somewhere. It wasn't joyful, it was mocking. Like the carnival itself was laughing at me. I needed answers, fast. There was an old, dark ride at the end of the lot. The kind with rickety carts, and a track that disappeared into a black tunnel. I climbed into one of the carts, hoping, praying, it would take me somewhere, anywhere. The ride jerked forward, and I was swallowed by darkness. Whispers filled the air, voices, familiar ones, kids I knew. Kids from my town who disappeared years ago. Their faces flashed by in the dim light. My heart was in my throat. This place wasn't just a carnival, it was a hunting ground. The ride stopped, and a figure stepped into the light. An old man, leathery skin, a tattered top hat. I knew him immediately, the ringmaster. He smiled, his teeth black and rotting. "Your family always owed a debt, Eli. It's time you paid up." I bolted from the cart, running for the exit. But I wasn't alone. The faces of children surrounded me, cold, accusing. The missing kids from the old carnival photos, trapped here, just like my mom. The ringmaster's voice echoed in my head. Your mother made the deal to keep you safe, but she didn't realize the price was eternal. My stomach twisted. My mom hadn't abandoned me. She sacrificed herself to keep me alive. But now the carnival wanted me. My soul. The ringmaster stepped closer, his voice cold and sharp. Blood for blood, Eli. That's how it's always been. Give yourself and she can go. I looked at my mom, still sitting on that cursed carousel. I'd been running my whole life. Running from my past. From the secrets no one wanted to talk about. I clenched my fist. There was only one way out. I took the knife and sliced into my palm. Blood dripped onto the dusty ground. The lights flickered. The rides creaked. The children vanished into the mist. The ringmaster's laughter faded into nothing, and the carnival crumbled around me. I looked up one last time. My mom was free. She smiled softly, and her whisper was the last thing I heard before the carnival disappeared into dust. Thank you. And then it was gone. Story 2. It was late. My car had been acting up all week, but of course it chose the middle of nowhere to die completely. I was stranded in front of this place, a carnival or what was left of one. I'd been doing this piece for months now, hunting down urban legends, writing them off as myths. This one? A carnival that supposedly shut down in 1945 after some mysterious disappearances. Cliché, right? Dad, with his no-nonsense cop logic, would have told me not to waste my time. But here I was. The sun was low, dipping behind the broken-down rides, and I could feel a knot tightening in my chest. Fear? No. I don't do fear. At least that's what I always told myself. Then a flicker caught my eye. I turned, and there it was. A rusty old sign lighting up out of nowhere. Welcome to Funland, it read. Perfect. Just what I needed. A ghost carnival light show. I laughed, but it sounded fake even to me. I stepped out of the car, gravel crunching under my boots. The sign flickered again, and I couldn't help but look around. The air felt heavy, like something was watching. But there was nothing. Just silence, old rides creaking in the breeze. As I moved further into the carnival grounds, I saw a ticket booth still standing. The window was cracked, but otherwise intact. Curious, I walked up, eyes scanning the counter. An old ticket lay there, like it had been waiting. July 4th, 1945. I reached for it, hesitating only for a second before grabbing it. That's when I heard it, clear as day. One for the Ferris wheel, miss? I spun around, heart hammering, but there was no one. Just the ticket booth, empty as ever. Great, I muttered, shaking it off. My imagination was getting the best of me, or was it? The Ferris wheel loomed ahead, its rusted metal frame towering over the rest of the carnival. It hadn't moved in years, maybe decades. But as I got closer, I swear the damn thing creaked to life. I should have turned around, gone back to my car. But the journalist in me, the one who had to prove there was nothing to fear, couldn't resist. I climbed into one of the seats, gripping the cold metal. The wheel jerked, then started to rise, slow and steady. From up there, I saw them. People. Dressed like it was still 1945. Kids with balloons, couples holding hands, parents pushing strollers. They looked so normal, but something wasn't right. Their smiles were too wide, their eyes too hollow. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. The wheel stopped at the top. I was stuck, looking down at a sea of dead-eyed faces staring straight at me. They didn't blink, didn't move, just watched. My hands shook, fingers digging into the seat. I needed to get out of there. As the wheel started to descend, I spotted him, a man in a ringmaster's suit, standing in the center of the crowd. He was staring right at me, his cold eyes locking onto mine. When the wheel finally stopped, I jumped out and ran, but the faces, they were gone. The crowd had disappeared, but the ringmaster? He stayed, didn't move an inch, just kept watching. I stumbled, legs weak, but forced myself to keep going. The parking lot wasn't far. My car was just ahead. Then, out of the shadows, 2 clowns stepped out. Old ragged costumes, faces smeared with dirt. They smiled, lips stretched too wide, makeup cracked like it had been painted on a century ago. "Leaving so soon?" one of them growled, his voice low and mocking. I froze, heart pounding in my chest. The clowns moved closer, step by step, their grins growing wider. I backed away, trying to think, but they had me cornered. The Ferris wheel was right behind me, groaning under the weight of years. Then he appeared again, the ringmaster. This time he spoke. "You're different, Cleo. You don't belong here, but I could make an exception." His voice was smooth, hypnotic. He held out a hand. "I've been watching you. You're special." A chill ran down my spine, but there was something about his voice. Something that almost made me want to listen. He promised me answers. About the carnival, about everything. All I had to do was stay. I shook my head. No, I needed to leave. But he kept talking, getting closer. "The carnival never closed, Cleo. We just stopped letting people leave. This place, it feeds on people like you. Curious, lost souls. And once you're here, you're part of it. Forever?" My blood ran cold. I had to get out. I turned to run, but the ground shifted beneath me. It wasn't solid anymore. It felt alive, like the carnival was pulling me in, swallowing me whole. I fought, but it was no use. The more I struggled, the deeper I sank. Then I remembered the ticket. The old, crumpled ticket in my hand. Desperate, I tore it in half. Instantly, the pull stopped. The ground solidified under my feet, and the carnival, everything, started to crumble. The clowns screamed, the Ferris wheel groaned like it was being ripped apart, and the ringmaster... His face twisted in rage. I didn't wait. I ran. Threw myself into the car and slammed the door shut, breath coming in ragged gasps. As I drove away, the carnival faded into the fog. Gone. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the ringmaster chasing me. But there was nothing. Just an empty road. "Never again?" I whispered, gripping the wheel. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Story 3. We were in the middle of nowhere, out on another stupid road trip because Pete wanted adventure. I didn't even want to be there. Driving for hours, looking for a thrill like we were still kids. But we weren't. I'm 22, a college dropout, and somehow I ended up in this old rust bucket with Pete and Derek, my 2 idiot friends. Pete, the fearless one, always pushing for the next crazy thing. Derek, the one who laughs at everything, even when it's not funny. And me, Mitch, the guy who gets dragged along, pretending not to care, but deep down, I always knew something was going to go wrong. We were cruising along this deserted road when we saw it, an old carnival ground. I swear I felt something the moment I saw it, a knot in my stomach, like I knew we shouldn't get any closer. But Pete, of course, he was all over it. "Let's check it out," he said, his grin wide like a dumb kid. "Man, I don't know," I muttered, trying to shake off the dread crawling up my spine. But Derek was already laughing, like he always did. "What's the worst that could happen?" Derek joked, slapping me on the back. So we hopped the fence. The banners flapped in the wind, all faded and torn, but it was still standing somehow. The place looked dead, but you could almost hear it, like the echo of something still moving inside. Once we were in, Pete started acting like he owned the place. Grabbing an old sledgehammer, he found the high striker, one of those dumb games where you hit the lever and try to ring the bell. He swung hard, but the bell barely moved. He laughed it off, but I felt it again. That feeling, like eyes were on us, like something was watching. I didn't say anything, didn't want to seem like a wuss, but I knew something wasn't right. Then Pete had to push it further. "Let's hit the fun house. First one to chicken out buys drinks for the rest of the trip." I hated that I cared what they thought. I didn't want to go in, but I didn't want to be the guy who backed down. So, I followed them. The second we stepped inside, I regretted it. The mirrors were cracked. The floors creaked under our feet, and the air was thick with dust, like the place hadn't seen a person in decades. But it wasn't just that. It felt wrong. I kept seeing things out of the corner of my eye, shadows, quick movements. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I told myself it was just my mind messing with me. Then Derek, the idiot, started messing with one of the mirrors, making faces. But something was off. He wasn't smiling, but his reflection was. His face just grinning back at him like it was alive. And then it moved. It walked away from the mirror, leaving Derek just standing there, frozen. "Did you see that?" I whispered, my voice shaking. Before anyone could answer, Pete's laughter died. He saw it too. A shadow, tall and thin, creeping along the walls. I could barely breathe. We tried to leave, but the exit wasn't there anymore. The whole funhouse had shifted, trapping us inside. Pete grabbed a piece of broken mirror like he could fight whatever this was, but it shattered in his hand, slicing him up. Blood hit the floor, and that shadow, it got closer. We ran. I could hear Derek's heavy breathing behind me. Pete shouting like a maniac. The walls twisted and shifted, pushing us deeper into the funhouse. I couldn't stop thinking, why did we come here? We should have just kept driving. Finally, we burst out of the funhouse, hitting the ground hard. But when I looked up, everything was different. The carnival. It wasn't old and broken anymore. It was like brand new. Fresh banners, bright lights. There were people everywhere walking around like it was 1945 again. My head was spinning. How long were we inside? Pete tried talking to one of the carnival workers, asking what was going on. The guy just smiled and handed him a ticket. "Welcome to the show, boys." Derek grabbed my arm, his face pale. "Mitch, we need to leave now." But something was wrong with the people. They weren't real. Up close, their faces were too pale, their eyes too glassy, like they were mannequins or worse. Corpses dressed up for a carnival that should have died years ago. Before we could make a move, the ground shook. The Ferris wheel came to life, spinning faster and faster. And up there, standing on top of it, was the shadow, watching us with glowing red eyes. The crowd started cheering. The ride spun out of control, lights flickering, and the music turned into this screeching nightmare sound that drilled into my skull. I couldn't take it anymore. I did the only thing I could think of. I made a deal. I told the shadow I'd stay if it let Pete and Derek go. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I just couldn't handle the guilt of dragging them into this. But the shadow, it listened. Its form twisted and grew darker, and I felt its cold hand on my chest. The curse lifted from Pete and Derek. They were free. But I wasn't. I watched as they ran toward the exit. The carnival faded behind them, but I was still there, part of the show. The Ferris wheel kept spinning, faster and faster, and I was trapped, forever part of the carnival that never really closed. The last thing I saw was the shadow smiling as it welcomed me to the ride of souls.